Bonjour et bienvenue dans ce
Hello,
cours
and
destiné à vous
welcome to
présenter les
today's
catégories de
class,
gestion des
in
aires
which we will
marines.
introduce the protected area management categories. The reference book to consult as a complement to the class is once again the guidelines on the management categories developed by WCPA, but you can also find a summary of everything in the NAPA Letter 59. In the previous module, we have learned how to determine categories and that what matters in doing so is the protected areas management objective. Sometimes there is a gap between the objective and reality, as can be seen in the field. You must always refer to the management objective. Too bad if the manager strays from it, hopefully only temporarily. Now, let's see what these categories are. There are 6 of them, as you can see on this list, and they are globally and roughly following a progressive evolution from territories intended to be kept in their natural state as much as possible, categories 1 to 3, to territories where the human intervention is increasingly visible, categories 4, 5, and 6. The first of these categories here is presented to us by Fabrice. Category 1 protected areas are protected areas where we are trying to limit human intervention and any alteration of the environment. So, these are truly protected areas where you protect the environment in its natural state as much as possible. Now, let's look at Category 2, which is commonly known as National Park. This name is actually somewhat inappropriate, but we have seen that the name of a territory doesn't necessarily determine, 1, whether it is a protected area, and 2, the way it is managed. But that's the way it is. Well, I work for the National Park of Gahuzi-Biega. It is a Category 2 park, which means that we really ensure the protection of natural resources through patrols and anti-poaching leagues. We do authorize scientific research in cooperation with the local universities. There is tourism. You know, we are in the Great Lake. Tourism is thriving, and of course, there is environmental education. All the schools in the region come here to take walks in the forest and look at rare species. The third category is relatively rare in Africa. It concerns territories that are classified to protect a specific natural monument, that is, a specific topographical element. It may be a mountain, a cavern, an underwater cave, a small island, or a remote forest. The fourth category is much more common, like, for example, the Dialing Park in Mauritania, seen here in this photo, where a system of dams allows constant control of the water level in order to manage nesting areas for birds, or, for example, fight against invasive aquatic species. Let's go back to Fabrice, who will tell us more about this. Speaking of protected area management, Category 4, we are talking about protected areas which primary objective is to protect a specific species or habitats in environments that generally require regular and active interventions to preserve these specificities or habitats. So we understand right away that these are not completely natural environments. These are really environments where there is already a human intervention in order to preserve these species or habitats. So it's really different from protected areas of categories 1 to 3, where the protected areas are mostly natural protected areas. The fifth category comprises of what is commonly known as landscapes. Yusuf tells us more. Protected areas of Category 5 are territories where interactions between man and nature produce specific or even cultural characteristics of their own. The management of these territories is then interested in the conservation of these specific characteristics, but also incorporates the alterations made by man. So here, we are far from categories 1 to 3 that are interested in the preservation of the original character of the area. Here, we are interested in the altered nature in order to conserve its specific characteristics. The Biosphere Reserve of the Senegal River Delta is an example of a Category 5 protected area that associates traditional reserves surrounded by village land and ensures their connectivity.
Entouré de terroirs villageois qui assurent leur connectivité.
Finally, Category 6 is the one that has experienced the strongest growth in recent years, as seen on this graph that is now familiar to you. Here are Category 6 currently. Let's listen to Ray Ingram, who tells us about it. It is used to protect and preserve ecosystems and natural habitats while promoting the development of the sustainable management of the natural resources found there.
Tout en promouvant le développement, la gestion durable des ressources naturelles qui s'y trouvent.
In general, Category 6 protected areas are large territories, the largest part of which preserves or presents a natural condition, but another part of which is subject to the moderate and rational use of the natural resources found there.
Mais une certaine partie est soumise à l'utilisation modérée et rationnelle des ressources naturelles qui s'y trouvent.
Of course, the distinction is imperative, because we are not talking about industrial natural resources, but the natural resources that the residents may use in a sustainable way. And many of the Category 6 protected areas that have been created recently are of this type. Finally, I can say that I, for instance, am from Burkina Faso, and in my country, we have the Nazinga Ranch, which is a Category 6 protected area where we protect nature, but residents can go hunting or fishing, though in a controlled and monitored manner. That's it. Now, we know what these categories are and why we use them. Let's simply clarify a few essential characteristics of these categories. First of all, this system is international, shared by all, to allow us to communicate with each other easily. For example, a meeting of park managers interested in sharing their experiences should, if possible, gather managers of protected areas of the same category to make more sense. We should keep in mind that in no case does the ranking in a category reflect the efficiency of the management of a territory. So, if a park doesn't meet the objective it was assigned, it is no reason to change its category to accommodate its manager in any way. It's actually the opposite that should happen, and the manager should do everything possible to bring his management in compliance with the objective of the park. Finally, all categories are important. Actually, a good network should include protected areas of various categories to make sure that the various management tools available are being used. Assigning a category to a park isn't complicated if you follow these few rules. Practice by examining the protected areas that you know. Look at their classification objective and deduce what their category is. Also, make a quick comparison with the reality on the field and ask yourself whether the park is actually in compliance with its objectives. It frequently is not the case. Do this for 3 or 4 parks, and classification should become a second nature for you. So, a park can only belong to one category, since it only has one primary management objective. Sometimes it is difficult to determine precisely what this objective is, but you must always do so in order to know which category it belongs to. If a park comprises of various areas with different management objectives, as happens rather frequently, in order to determine the category of the whole, if this whole is managed by the same entity, we will refer to the main objective of the whole, which is generally the one applying to the largest surface. We often speak of the 75-25 rule, as the category is determined by the management objective applying to over 75% of the territory.
du territoire.
Now, if a park is divided into areas that are managed differently, with different objectives, by different entities, each of them may be assigned a different category, as though they were actually two completely different parks.
Peut se voir attribuer une catégorie différente, comme s'il s'agissait en fait de deux parcs complètement différents.
A good example of this type of situation is a cross-border park, composed of two different parks on each side of the border, that may be managed differently, and be of two different categories, or may be of the same category, if they share the same management objectives.
Différemment, avoir deux catégories différentes, mais aussi avoir la même catégorie, évidemment, s'ils partagent les mêmes objectifs de gestion.
For example, the so-called W ecosystem between Niger, Burkina, and Benin comprises of 3 parks managed separately, which means that each has its own category.
Donc, chacun avec sa propre catégorie.
In the present case, it so happens that all 3 of them are Category 2.
De catégorie 2. Voilà,
That's it. It's the end of the class. The next episode will look at the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is, of course, a fundamental text for the management of protected areas, as you will see. This text will be presented to us by Paul Ouedraogo. Have a great day.